where do you see the support services in the long run? Do you I know you just sort of said that SBS were talking about they need to be agnostic, but with the world as it currently stands, do you, because there's two extremities, isn't there? You've got the support services which are associated to local authorities, and they are purely non-profitable in essence. They're basically taking a top slice.
Non-profitable, but sometimes quite a lot of surplus.
Yes. Yeah, no. I was going to say there's also those ones at arm's length, which are basically running like a business and feeding back into the local authority as well, for sure. And actually, you can still see, ultimately they're acting like a commercial business as well in their own right.
And to be clear, there are some teams that are, actually within the local authority where MIS support is the most profitable thing that the local authority does, and it's like profitable. It generates the most surplus per unit of traded income, and that's a really interesting place for a local authority to be. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, at all. No, you're absolutely right, and you're right to sort of make that as make that statement. I totally agree, and in some local authorities they just almost sort of abuse that offering in some ways. I think where they reduce down the number of people because obviously they want to cut costs and at the same time still take the potential profit. But I think there is. But I think it's interesting because it's a market also that's going through a lot of change. Based on the amount of maintained schools now becoming academies, especially in England. I appreciate in Wales and Northern Ireland that's different, but in England, there is ultimately the academisation is really tearing into some of these support services. And I've always thought, and I it's obviously only a prediction, but sort of thought, well, actually, it's going to consolidate down into, let's say, 8, 10. London aside, because I think that's a bit different sometimes. They seem to work differently. But, where do you see the support service? Do you think they're going to have to all be more commercially focused? Do you think they're all going to have to start maybe aligning themselves a little bit more with other suppliers or buying? Are they going to be like SE Group where you start looking and saying, should we acquire some of these different companies? Is that important to us or is it not important to us? Where do you see this part of the market going?
Okay,
there's a lot of questions there. Sorry.
No. Look, it's but again, really interesting questions. Right, let me pick out a few of the sort of sub questions, and we'll see if it takes us to a conclusion. Let me start with will there be consolidation, and will there be consolidation? Yes, I believe so. I believe in LAs or in LA support services, like in the rest of the world, there will be some consolidation for a bunch of reasons. Part of that will be the need to support more MIS systems and the requirement for a larger scale to do that in a sort of compelling way. Back in the days when most LAs basically supported one, you could do that at a smaller scale. Not just that, but the world is changing. People occasionally debate the benefits of private capital flowing into the education world. One of the things that it does tend to stimulate is investment in product, and typically finding ways in which you can make a fixed investment in software or in process improvement that will reduce the variable cost to serve without screwing up quality too much, maybe even improving quality. And that basically means that once you've gotten to the scale where you can make that investment, you have a fundamentally superior product. Because as long as you can amortize the cost of maintaining that across, whatever it is, hundreds or thousands of schools, you can do a better, cheaper job per school per year. And if I tried to sort of think about, what companies had, how many companies had made that investment, and let's say particularly for support services, how many companies had made that investment 10 years ago? It would have been almost none. And now, most companies and several LAs are kind of some way down that track. So one, we're moving, as I said, like the rest of the world, there are fundamental, you can do things at scale that you can't do at subscale.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Secondly, will all LAs have to commercialize their operations? I don't think so. I think actually, I think that a well-run LA operation can be very compelling. Question, is LA able to develop these sort of incentives and governance necessary to make sure it's well-run? One can debate, some do, some don't. But a well-run LA team can be pretty compelling. And actually, I'm quite an admirer of North Yorkshire Education Services. They've had 20 years of year-on-year growth, something like that. I mean, they're really interesting, really ambitious. They bring a real passion, to serve the public sector to their work. But equally, they're not pressured about restricting themselves either to the public sector or to North Yorkshire. They stray well outside both of those. Is that a long-term winner in this space? I mean, time will tell, but I would like to believe that they will be one of the winners. Will these local authorities become acquirers? It's basically really hard for a local authority to do that. There are some exceptions. Actually, the Yorkshire Purchasing Organisation, I think, is in a really interesting place, and Simon Hill there does, in my view, an absolutely amazing job of managing, a complex set of local authority shareholders. Granted, sort of, there's a couple of dominant sponsors in that, but I think he's, unusually for effectively an LA-owned group, he's probably got the capability to acquire, and I think that's very good and very healthy. And then the last one you asked, will people go broad? Well, yes, yes. I think they'll have to, and the reason for this is that the world is changing from software that you basically run on servers in schools. Arguably, the world has changed because there's a big move away from this, to cloud native solutions, and that has a couple of implications. Not least, the skill set required to serve that is very different. To serve server-based software installations, you need people to run around switching servers on and off and swapping them out and upgrading them and blah, 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 blah. And you need people who have enough coding ability to basically do the cobbled together integration, within the school environment. In a cloud native solution, you don't really need either of those skills. You need people who know how to do data management and analysis, not historically a core strength of most MIS support teams. And you need people who can think about sort of, APIs and, customer journeys and look and feel and user experience and all of that stuff, so that you can actually help the customer, the school, to work out how to fit tools together when they can't really, do anything on a bespoke basis. They can configure, but they can't really customize. And a well-designed cloud-native solution will allow a lot of configurability, so you don't need to customize. But again, many of them are on a journey. So I think that's another very, very important change that we're all going through. And are local authorities well equipped to make that change? Very different skill sets, and let's say and it can be quite difficult to retrain someone who is good at the first bunch to be someone who's good at the second bunch. So our local authority is good at basically redeploying people and replacing people. Some are, but many aren't, and I think that will be a very difficult transition.
I agree. Again, fully agree with you. I think it's interesting because you're basically sort of going, I want now. I think MATs and schools, especially academies, especially with the cloud solutions that are out there, it's not about actually can you plug this in anymore. It's more along the lines of, can you be a strategic IT, support team, please? Can you help us? We have this school improvement, or we have this strategy, actually, can you help us bring that together with, what suppliers do you think you recommend? I think it would even get to that point. You have your help with procurement. Which suppliers are best fitted for our strategy. And sort of coming back to your use cases, I think that's where it's going to be really important. I think, you're going to have to go into a school, be consultative, try and work out where their school improvement is, what they're planning to do, and then say, actually, here's a solution I think will fit this. I don't think it will be any more of, actually, I've got the solution. Can you tell me exactly how I get a template out, please? Or can you how do you plug the server in again? Can you help me with the network? All that sort of thing. I think it's going to start moving away.
And and as I say, there are some local authorities that are good at all of those things, but most will be tripped up by, if you look at those I think we went through five challenges there. Most LAs will be tripped up by 2 or 3 of them. That doesn't mean they all have to quit.
Yeah.
But it means that I think they've got to work out what is fundamentally different about them. And of course, exacerbating the problem is, as you said, more academization. That doesn't just mean more switching of providers, because academization does tend to prompt a bunch of switching of providers. But it also means, less de-delegated funding coming in a kind of block contract to the LA. And that means the LA has to get used to going out and selling their solutions. And some are very good at that, and some are on a journey.
Yeah, it's about showing your value now, isn't it? It's not a case of you got this. So under sort of this, the situation when I was at Sims, there was FM agreements. Your patch was secure. You basically had this bunch of schools which you basically serviced. They really fundamentally didn't ever want to move. They basically, because the service was good as well. I might add, these support teams were very, very strong. But what it meant is, you basically didn't have to worry about going out there and saying, actually, the value of us is this. This is why you should buy into our services. And that's what's changed. What's changed is they're going to have to go and say, actually, for us to retain your business, this is why you should. This is our value proposition. This is the value we're offering to you. And that will be hard for some of them, because I don't think some of them want to be that that person as well, I might add. It's not a case of saying, do they have it in them? It's more a case of some of them don't want to be that person.
That Sims case study is a really interesting one, because you've got to admire the fact that actually Sims basically created and guaranteed enough scale in local authorities for them to invest in capability to do, actually, as you said, really good work over, 10, 15 years in supporting their schools. And most LA support teams did do very, very good work in supporting what, at the time, even still now, but at the time was, by miles the most complicated piece of technology that a school would run. And that was very powerful. Now, did that create an environment where it was possible to get a bit complacent? Maybe.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, it's fundamentally, it's an interesting case, because everyone sort of goes, well, Sims had, say, 22,000 schools. Actually, what they had was, 160 odd local authority support teams, That's basically what they, that's their customer base, really, because ultimately, how could you service 22,000 schools otherwise? So it is a great model, which obviously I can't take any credit for, unfortunately, but I can definitely feel Neil took credit for. It's a great model, but yeah, I agree with you. I think there's an element where, and I think it's probably shown it a little bit. Over time, you can get to this position where it becomes, you can easily get complacent about your customer base. I think that's fundamentally shown.
And again, to be fair to Sims, they were, could they have invested more in developing the product and pushing it ahead? I think there's no doubt they could have. But they were constrained not just by, their owners' desire to see, a pretty punchy return on their investment, over money, arguably, but also by competition concerns. I actually, is it great that you have a provider build with a not quite monopoly, but very, very dominant position, sort of building generation after generation after generation of amazing products. Yes, however, are you then creating an environment where future innovation will be stifled? It's a very difficult balancing act. And one of the reasons why I think it's very healthy that there are now, as I say, 8 or 10 active consolidators, we can all chase scale and all the things that scale allow us to do without, I think, anybody getting too wound up about the fact that we're too big, because there's enough of a tension between us.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the situation that the market is in now is a really exciting one, actually. I'm really excited for it. I think it's amazing.
It feels like it to us.
Yeah, and actually, do you know what, knowing, sort of knowing bits about your business, I think it is a great time. I think about, I'll allow you to talk about it if you want to, but I think you're tackling both sides, which both sides of the market in the sense of support as well as looking at other opportunities as well. And I think that's a really, really good place to be, in my personal view. But
we are. I've got to say, I love it, and it's a great place to be after 22 years as a strategy consultant. But there's so many things that we as a group are excited about at the moment. Not least, sort of, actually sort of being able to invest against some of those scale aspects to make our products more tech enabled, easier to use, automating more things, and so on and so forth over time, but also to be more disciplined about measuring the actual impact of our products on schools and learners, so that we can actually say with conviction, we're not just selling feature X, Y, Z, that you're going to market for. We're selling these benefits because our products deliver that, and that is actually aligned to the school's mission. Either they're better at supporting kids that are getting left behind, or they're better, helping rural schools to collaborate, or whatever it is. But actually sort of really sort of getting through to, how can we help a head teacher, a mat chief executive, a chair of governors to deliver a brilliant service to their constituents, mainly their learners. Also their staff, super important to recognize that, actually the workforce in schools is a really critical constituency that, in large parts has felt a bit taken for granted over the last few years. And I think we really recognize that, we have to help our customers to help their workforce. So we're kind of on this, as I say, we're all on a journey. We're on this journey to sort of really sort of going from, doing a bunch of things well, to, from that, delivering the right results to the right people and measuring that and being very disciplined about holding ourselves to account. And by the way, it helps that by doing that, we hope that we'll be able to impress schools and persuade them that actually, we can do a fantastic job for them.
And I probably don't need to say this in some ways, but I think that, you look at that sort of journey. The fact is that you are, your businesses, are really close to the coalface. So the measurement piece is actually really, it can become really obvious. It can be really, quite stark in some ways because they're there. It's not like sending out a survey and saying, do you enjoy our services? Do you enjoy our product? You've actually got people in the coalface who actually can really understand and value and help measure really what your customers feel. So actually partners, you're having people, around, other educational partners who want to work with you, they get the same benefit, because ultimately you've always got two arms, haven't you? You've got the one which is at the coalface, supporting schools, and a lot of them, so you've got direct impact and direct contact. And then you've got this other side, which is actually, we're also looking at, you're looking at some the tech side, but actually partnering with all these companies could benefit them immensely for analysis.
Absolutely. And I mean, I don't think there's any state secret. We're doing some work with ImpactEd at the moment, like many. And in particular, one of our supply teacher agencies is looking at a process of how they, looking at a process of sort of understanding and measuring and articulating, how they deliver value to their school customers. And we did one of their sort of theory of change workshops recently, and sort of coming out of that, one of the team said, look, coming in here, we didn't really understand, we didn't really think that you were going to be able to show that a supply teacher agency could really deliver value. And coming out of this, we're really excited that actually there's a bunch of things that can be done, a bunch of things we're doing, a bunch of things that we can do better, that actually, could really, can and do really, really support schools in their mission. And actually that was an incredibly rewarding thing to hear, because we've known all along that actually our supply teacher agencies are a critical support for their customers. But the segment has such a poor reputation, with government, among other, with many schools, that actually it's easy to sort of feel like you're a utility, and to stop being ambitious about sort of how can we do this better, how can we provide better support. And I think we've managed to sort of keep that alive, and I hope that it comes through in that articulation. I think it will.